Okay, thank you for listening to Ingram Law. As always, we appreciate you being a guest. Our website is joeingramlaw.com. My phone number is 205-335-2640. As always, we do take your questions off the air and get back to you. We take cases from Huntsville to Birmingham to Montgomery, Mobile, even down in the Wiregrass area of Dothan. Got a new criminal case down there this week. And our podcast is Real Law Alabama, where we talk about all law issues in the state of Alabama. We do have featured guests that we like to present to our audience that I think presents unique perspectives on areas of law. And tonight we have the privilege of having Vince Adams of Adams Law LLC. Vince, are you there?
Hey, Joe, I sure am. How are you tonight?
I'm great. Vince, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Well, I appreciate this opportunity. I just enjoy trying to share information and knowledge, and more importantly for me is to learn as well. So I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, it's just a conversation, and we have good fun with it. But I know a little bit about you. For our audience, tell the audience where you grew up, a little bit about your background.
Sure. I grew up predominantly in Gardendale, Alabama. I was born in Montgomery, but family moved to Birmingham when I was about four. So throughout my youth, and I grew up in the great city of Gardendale. I believe that's how I know Joe. We grew up together as childhood friends.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Man, that's been a long time, but it seems like yesterday some days when when you stop and start thinking.
That's true. That's true. Um, so our audience, um, for them to understand about you, um, how long have you been practicing law?
I was kind of a late bloomer, Joe, in law. I've been practicing about 17 years. My background was finance. I went to Alabama and studied business and finance, and I always had a passion for that, even at a young age. So when I got out of college, I spent about 12 years as a business creditor analyst with Dun and Bradstreet, and then went on to work with one of the competitors, Experian, in the credit industry. And that's sort of how I got involved in law and in the creditor part of law. Is while I was in working with Experian, I was starting going to law school at night. Did that for 4 years. I worked full time, transversing the United States. I had accounts all over the U.S., but made it back to law school every night. Tried my best, and it took a 4 years, but graduated from Birmingham School of Law. So that I kind of segued from working with companies like Experian, going to law school, and then once I got out of law school, I kind of went on the offense and started defending consumers against companies like Experian and Equifax and TransUnion. So I've seen and worked kind of both sides of the V, I guess you could say, from a law standpoint and also from the business world standpoint as well.
Okay. Um, and um, what are you primarily working on right now?
That is interesting. I I did work with, like I said, in creditor law, FCRA, which is the credit reporting issues, FDCPA, which is the collection of federal laws. I worked in that area of law for about 12 to 13 years. Interestingly, about 4 years ago, I was approached by another colleague. He knew I represented a lot of military service members, and there was this new lawsuit that came out about 2018. Many people have heard about it, but most have not, I don't think, called the 3M defective earplug lawsuit. And that was a mass tort regarding the earplugs that were supplied to the military starting back in 2003 during the Iraq invasion. So the last 4 years, I've been heavily involved in that case. And we just recently settled that case back in August of last year. However, we're still doing a lot of wrapping up on the settlement end of that litigation. So the last 4.5 going on 5 years, my time's really been
Yeah.
dedicated to military service members and with this lawsuit.
So, are you the lead plaintiff counsel in this case?
Mm, absolutely not. No, not at all. In a mass tort, it does take a team of lawyers. The lead plaintiff firm is in Pensacola, Florida, but I do represent about 2,500 military service members scattered throughout the U.S. Um, this case was massive. It is the largest litigation in the history of the United States litigation. And when it comes to mass torts, at its peak, there was about 315,000 litigants. Once we settled it, that number was been narrowed down to about 250,000. At one point in time, it took up one third of the federal docket on the civil side. So it's massive, and it takes a lot of resources, a lot of expertise. There are literally probably 1,000 lawyers working on this case. I was just fortunate enough to be a very small piece of it, but um, these type cases take a lot of resources and a lot of time. And it's something I was not very familiar with, but I appreciated having the opportunity because I've learned so much about the mass tort world. It's kind of a different beast all of its own.
And you have 2,500 personal clients in this?
Yes, the my me and my colleague, there's 2 of us here in Birmingham that's worked on this case. I think together we had about 3,000, but 2,500 were directly my clients, and those are clients I had previously represented in other financial matters over the last 12 to 15 years. So my colleague he knew I had a very diverse group of military clients for the last decade, and just thought this would be a lawsuit, an action that we could help a lot of guys. And I kind of underestimated it at first. I didn't realize how many people were impacted in the military that use these earplugs until I got involved. Literally, for about 15 years, these earplugs were the standard issue plug for all military members through all branches. So it was much bigger than we even thought to begin with.
Yeah. Not trying to be too personal,
Yeah.
but I'm sitting here with bated breath. Um, and I know a little bit about class action lawsuit cases. And usually the plaintiff, or the claimant gets a form and they say, "We've settled this case and you can opt in or opt out." And the client gets maybe some nominal fee. Is that necessarily the case for you in this particular kind of case?
That is a great question, and it is something I've dealt with for 4 years. This is not a class action, and this is a mass tort, and I learned myself, very early on the distinction between the 2, and here's a good example. The difference between a class action is mass tort is this: say you and I have a dishwasher, it goes out. I bought mine at Sears, you bought yours at Target, and it has a defect. And we're both and it goes out, has a bad built or a product defect. We're both out the same injury. That would be classified as a class action. The difference with a mass tort, it's a product case, but every person who used that product may have a different injury. So, like in this case, we had soldiers, some who had mild tinnitus or tinnitus, as they like to call it in the medical world, tinnitus, or they had slight hearing loss or varying degrees of hearing loss. So, in a mass tort, the damages are really based on your injuries. Not everyone would get the same amount of damage monetarily, like in a class action. And like I've explained to a lot of my clients who thought this was a class action, you're not going to just get $10 in a coupon to buy more defective earplugs. Your damages are going to be based on your medicals. And that was one reason I decided to get involved in this case because I'm not a big proponent of class actions even as an attorney, and when I learned this was not a class action, that it was really a mass tort, that kind of changed my perspective and my goals and my vision of what this could be in the future for some of our clients.
So let me ask you this. You got 2,500 to 3,000 clients. Is it on you to show all the expenses for these 2,500 individual people?
No, the judge, the court in this case, because it was so massive, um, she streamlined a lot of this case. We had she streamlined even the complaint process, but most importantly, she streamlined the medical request through a TUI request, which is anytime you're dealing with the government and medicals, there's a special law that can procedure that can be triggered by the court to help the lawyers out in getting information they need to find the valuation of cases. In this case, it was the TUI request. So the court put designed a lot of different steps and procedures that help the attorneys on both sides of the V to get to the damage and valuations of these cases. That was a really important step in this process. We had an incredible judge in Pensacola, Judge Rogers. She was just fantastic in terms of organizing and can you can imagine with 300 over 300,000 litigants and to wrap this up in 4.5 years is just phenomenal. Most mass torts can take as long as I've seen them as long as 12 to 15 years of this magnitude.
Yeah. Um, so my next question, which you may not want to answer, and if you don't, I understand. Um, do you get paid per client, or are you just getting a cut as a as part of the plaintiff's litigation counsel, if that makes sense?
That does make sense, and that's a good question. If you're a lead plaintiff in a case like this, they get an extra percentage um, as the lead plaintiff. All the other attorneys, such as myself, we still represent our clients on a contingency arrangement. Our contingency in this case was 40%. And that may seem like that's high, but in the mass tort world, there's three tiers of pricing. It's a third, 40%, or 50%. And that's
Right.
really determined based on the complexity of the case, how long we anticipate it might take, the defense, their defenses. You try to estimate and price as the attorney what it's going to cost because literally for 5 years, we do not get paid. It's just completely one sided. We pay all the expenses up front, and it might take 3 years, it might take five, it might take eight. So we try to estimate. So in our case, our fee was 40% of the recovery. And so if we did not recover, that was the risk we took. We would take the financial risk. The biggest risk in this case was something called the governmental immunity clause. And that's what 3M tried to use to have this case just dismissed on summary judgment to begin with. And that was the biggest risk. We got over the immunity clause, which basically says if you're a government contractor, you can cloak yourself in immunity because you're working on behalf of the government.
Right.
Fortunately, Judge Rogers decided that there was fraud involved based on evidence what we discovered. So they couldn't cloak themselves in immunity due to being a government contractor. But to go back to your question, yeah, we were paid 40% contingencies.
So now, Vince, I am really jealous because
Oh, well.
I'm sitting here. I'm thinking, I'm coming to see Vince. You got a lot of money.
No, well, number one, we still have not been paid.
Yeah.
We're working through the settlements part. Um, There is, again, a lot of expense on this. To give you an idea, a filing fee, which we do recover the filing fees back, but up front, if you don't have the cash as an attorney, you have to go out and get loans to finance this type litigation a lot of times, unless you do have deep pockets. But filing fees $405. Multiply that by 3,000 clients. That's paid out of our pockets.
Wow.
And again, so it's an expensive endeavor to do these type cases. That was another reason I was very, very hesitant to do this. But we, of course, you usually get a syndicate, either investors or banks, to be able to finance this if you don't have the money or you don't wish to spend your money. You spend other people's money, of course. But that comes at a cost called interest, of course. Um, in this case, too, the settlement, like I said earlier, being a mass tort, not everyone received the same the same valuation. I can tell you now the payout on this case ranged from 5,000 a client up to about half a million a client. So on average, I think the average might be $30,000 at best. Um, they structured this settlement as very top heavy for the most injured people, which that's really how it should be. But the minimum settlement value was 5,000 a case.
I'm sitting here, Vince. I'm sitting here. Vince, at 5,000 apiece, that's $15 million.
That is about right. Yes, that's about right. For
Well,
that was for our section. And um, now the calculation you really want to do is if you're the lead plaintiff, because you get 9% of the total settlement. Plus, I know for a fact the lead plaintiff lawyer had over 50,000 cases, and he would receive 40% of those 50,000 plus the 9%.
mm,
Well, he won't. I won't say that one firm. The leadership. So it could be several different firms that were in the leadership role that would share in the 9%. But that's the big dogs. That's your 1% lawyers in America who are at that table. And I think that's a big misconception of law is that every lawyer makes a lot of money, which they do not. I mean, it's just I think that's a big misconception of our industry. That one, they're all in it for the money, and two, they all make the money. And I don't think either one of those premises are correct. From my experience with all my friends and colleagues and what I've experienced in 17, 18 years of law, that's not the case. I think that's just something you see on TV.
yeah. Well, I have no problems with what you make. I, I'm not saying that. And you earned it. You got 3,000 clients. You probably got unlimited hours in this case. And
Um, I can't tell you how many hours I worked on this, at least 6 days a week, 12 hours a day for 5 years. Sometimes I try not to work on Sunday. I do my best not to. So I can confidently say 6 days a week, 12, 13 hours a day for almost 5 years is probably what I've put into this. And again, we took the risk that we were not guaranteed any settlement. And that's just the risk you take. But I felt I just got I've always said this, after this case, I cannot think of a better client that I would rather represent than one of our military service members. I've made a lot of friends in the military. I've heard a lot of war stories, the things they've had to put up with, the mental issues, the PTSD is real. I talk to people on a weekly basis who have PTSD. It is real. You hear about it, but until you interact and speak with these people, it's another level. So I have so much respect for that, and I'm kind of sad to see this case end because, like I said, I don't think I'll ever have better clients than the ones I've had the last 5 years.
yeah. Well, congratulations. I'm very proud of you.
Well, thank you, thank you. I mean, the monetary part, that's always nice, but again, I've learned so much. I've opened my eyes to a different viewpoint of law and equity, and doing what's right. The evidence that I've saw that was in this case, it is a very classic case of American greed and corporate greed. The evidence that came out that I saw firsthand, heard in court, was shocking. There could be a movie made about this case. There really could be. Um,
Well,
and
there might be one.
that might be another story for another day.
Okay. Well, that is a very fascinating story. That is really cool. Um,
Yeah.
so let's jump to what I call my quick answer questions, where we talk a little bit
Did I
about
lose you?
events. Huh?
Okay. I thought I
No,
lost you there, Jay.
no, you're good. You're good. So let's let the audience get to know you a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Um, what is the best compliment you have ever received?
It would have to be from my wife. Um, when she said I wanted to marry you, and when she said I do, for her to say that to me was a huge compliment. because I was older when I got married. I was 34, 35 when I got married.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was older. I think I delayed my life by 10 years. From my law career to my children to my wife. I joke with my wife I have more in common when I go to school with my kids with the grandparents than I do the fathers because of my age.
Yeah. Um, what is your favorite pastime and why?
Baseball, no doubt. I played baseball through high school, played a couple years in college. Um, my family, I have 3 cousins that played Major League Baseball. Um, it's just when we get together, that's what we talk about. And so I love baseball, the aspects of the strategy, the history, the numbers, the statistics, everything about baseball. It really, to me, was always life. I could always create a story around or an analogy around baseball because there's so many facets of the game that apply to life.
Hmm. I have to admit, Vince, I cannot stand to watch baseball on TV.
I
I
am in
don't.
the same boat, Joe. I cannot watch it either. It's one dimensional, and baseball's a nine-dimensional game. I can't sit. Not. I've never been able to do that either. I can might watch 1 or 2 innings. I get bored with it on TV because I know too, knowing so much about the game, I'm missing so much when I'm watching on TV. It's just not the same.
Hmm.
I guess it's more like
Okay.
NASCAR. Just watching cars go around the track on TV. It's a completely different
Right.
experience in person, right? Same thing with baseball.
Yeah. Um, my father-in-law um, was a horse racing fan, and
Awesome.
so he would take us to the Kentucky Derby, to the Preakness Stakes, and then to the Belmont.
Wow.
And it was a very unique experience. And to me, I thought this is just horses going around a track. But for him, he studied the horses year round. And he studied where they were raised, their thoroughbreds, their
Mhm.
pedigree. And I learned so much from him when I went to the horse track that when he went to the horse track, he went there to win money.
Right.
Now I went there and I just gave my money away. But he knew what he was doing. And I always got a kick out of that.
That is
Um,
funny.
yeah, it is. Um, so growing up, what did you want to do when you grew up, Vince? Or did you
Um,
know?
I kinda did know, I mean, every little boy who plays baseball, of course, you wanna be a Major League Baseball player, and, the closest thing I got to Major League Baseball was in 1984. I was actually a bat boy for the Birmingham Barons. So that was my closest stint I ever got to MLB. So, but other than that, when I was about 15 or 16, I really got fascinated with the financial markets, and I started I knew right then and there, I wanna do something in the financial world. So from a young age, I started studying, the markets, commodity markets, stock markets, equities, and then I studied under a professor. Actually, at Jeff State, there was a professor there. I'll never forget him, named Chester Gates. He kind of took me under his wing. He was a trader. He actually traded commodities in Chicago, and his father had a seat at one time at the New York Stock Exchange. So when I was, I think, 19 or 20, I got the opportunity to go with him to the markets, to Chicago, to New York, get on the trading floor and watch him trade. And that was just fascinating to me, especially as an impressionable 19-year-old kid to see that in person. Um, so that was really, I think, also lit a fire under myself to want to work and somewhere in the financial world, maybe not in the markets themselves, but something to do with finance.
Okay. Um, what is your favorite movie, and what does it reveal about you as a person?
Favorite movie. I tell you, Joe, um, I guess one of my favorite movies is The Firm with Tom Cruise. I mean that That's like every lawyer's dream, if you're coming out of traditional law school, if you watch that movie or actually the book's much better than the movie, like a lot of things are, but, even the movie wise, I just enjoy that movie. I can still watch it today and it seems fresh, but, uh, I guess it was because he in that movie, the attorney, he was just so focused. So he thought he knew what he wanted to do with his life, with law, and then life happens, and life changes you. And one track you think you're on, and then life hits you square in the face, and you have to adjust. So I really like that movie, and I like the book even more so by John Grisham. And I'm a big John Grisham fan
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: What um, is one of your biggest challenges in life?
Public speaking, and that's one thing I wish I. Part of me would like to be a better, would like to be able to speak publicly much better than I do. It is one of my fears, and you think as a lawyer you wouldn't have that fear of public speaking, but if anybody who does public speaking tells you they're not scared when they get on that stage, they're probably lying to you. But that's probably one thing I really would be better at. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if you know this name, the famous uh, criminal lawyer Jerry Spence. Do you know that name?
I do know that name. Yes, I
You
do.
know, um, um, Jerry runs a litigation trial school every summer up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and it costs about $4,000 to attend. And you have to apply early to get in. And I've applied twice, and I've never made the deadline. But Jerry tells the story in his book that if you are a trial lawyer and you are not scared before you get up to give your opening statement or cross examine the first witness, that you're either lying or you don't care. And I had a divorce trial today. That this was the second day of trial, and I had to do pretty much the entire direct and cross examine all day. So I was on my feet all day asking questions, and I was nervous when I got started, but it's kind of like playing football. After you get hit in the mouth the first 5 minutes,
Hmm.
the adrenaline wears off, and you just start doing your job. So yeah, I was nervous this morning.
Well, that's when your training takes over and your experience. But yeah, I'd have to agree with Jerry. I mean, I can't remember a time I wasn't a little nervous before any significant of even emotion hearing. I mean, if you're not just a little bit, I might take it too personal. Maybe that's why I get so nervous at times. But that's just the way it is sometimes.
Yeah. Um, so we're getting close to wrapping up, and I really appreciate your time tonight. It has been so entertaining to hear about your stories. Um, how are you different today versus your younger self?
Kids change you. So I think because of my children, I'm probably more um, relaxed or something. I used to be very high strung, um, kind of just wide open. And kids kind of bring you around and slow you down a little bit. You get different perspectives of life, right? And my children probably have changed me in that regard to the betterment. And to see that um, life is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And I think I used to live life like it was a sprint, and it's not.
Yeah. So
So
I'm going to give you the final word tonight to talk to the audience and tell them what you want to share with them about Adam's Law and anything else you would like to share with our audience.
excellent. I sure will. Um, First thing I want to say is every morning I do this and I pray more and more people do this, but every morning before you touch that phone is to touch your Bible or touch your devotion with Jesus Christ every morning. Um, I'd like to leave that with you. but also Adams Law, like I said, we're really designed for the consumer out there who may have credit related issues, credit reporting errors, even bankruptcy issues, um, debt collectors. I believe in the next few years, you're going to get more and more debt collection phone calls and a lot more credit reporting errors just due to the economy today and what I think's to come. So that's sort of our specialty. So I would, if anyone has any questions, always can reach out to us. Our website's it's adamslawllc.com. It's adamslawllc.com. My phone number at the office is 205 414 7421.
Okay. Well, Vince, um, we haven't spoken probably in 35 or 40 years.
Been a while.
And I reached out to you, and you were so gracious to give me your time tonight, and I appreciate that. And I mean that sincerely. I'm very honored when somebody gives me 30 minutes of their time.
Well, I'm honored you remembered me, Joe. I really do, man. I'm glad you made that phone call. It was just great to hear from you. We're getting older, and I like to reconnect with people I hadn't talked to in a while. Man, it just and find out what other people are doing in life and how successful they've been. And I love to see people become successful. I mean, I just like to hear those stories and see that. I can tell you definitely have. I'm very proud of you. Um, very, very, I am very proud. So
Uh,
thank you for this opportunity.
all right. Vince, you have a good night. Okay.
You too, Joe. We'll talk later.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
So, for our viewers at home, thank you for listening tonight. Always, if you have questions, give us a call, and take care of yourself and have each other and have a good night.
No representation is made that the quality of the legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by other lawyers.